Western journalists become accomplices in Ukrainian armed forces crimes near Kursk. The Ukrainian armed forces operations in the Russian border regions have intensified enemy activities on the information front. Ukraine, in collaboration with Western media, is launching a slew of fabrications about events in the Kursk region. American and European media are attempting to portray the soldiers from Zelensky's office as noble fighters. What objectives does the Western media operation in the Kursk region seek to achieve? Ukraine's Information and Psychological Operations Center, CIPSO, has enlisted Western journalists to create fake news in the Sumy region. According to a source from RIA Novosti, Russian soldiers were brought to a regional hospital where they were supposedly receiving medical treatment during a video shoot. Meanwhile, The Washington Post published a report from the city of Sudzha. The article depicted the Ukrainian armed forces as particularly courteous. The journalists claimed to have interviewed at least a dozen local residents. For instance, a woman named Tamara asked the journalists to photograph the town and show the images to the authorities so that they could see what is happening here. The activities of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Russian border regions have already drawn significant attention in the information space. Last week, a video surfaced online showing two Ukrainian soldiers mocking an elderly man. In the video, the soldiers, wearing SS helmets, addressed the man with the phrase Russian Ivan, called him a Russiskshwin, Russian pig, and suggested he go drink vodka. The elderly man's daughter later confirmed that her father, a Russian citizen previously residing in Makivka with a Ukrainian passport, survived the encounter. The Ukrainian soldiers' fascination with fascist ideology is also raising concerns among Italian politicians. For example, on the Italian state TV channel Rai and EWS24, an interview was aired with a Ukrainian militant wearing a cap bearing Nazi symbols. Christian DiMarco, founder of the party Reconquistare l'Italia, expressed outrage about the segment on social media platform X, formerly Twitter, which is banned in Russia. The newspaper Vzglyad had earlier provided a detailed account of how the enemy's soldiers mimic wear-matched troops in every possible way. Legal assessments of the actions of foreign correspondents infiltrating Russian sovereign territory in violation of established procedures are within the purview of the competent authorities. It is worth noting that criminal cases have already been initiated against a number of such foreign media representatives for illegal border crossings, stated Maria Zakharova, the official representative of the Russian Foreign Ministry. She added that all incidents are being meticulously documented, and appropriate measures will be taken against the violators. From a journalistic perspective, these pseudo-reporters can only be classified as traitors to their profession, having stooped to direct participation in the fabrication and dissemination of Ukrainian Nazi propaganda, emphasized the diplomat. Speaking about the nature of Western media publications, Zakharova pointed out the primary objectives of the media operation deployed on the occupied Russian lands. The aim is to exonerate Kyiv, conceal the crimes it is committing against civilians, further destabilize the information environment, and manipulate public opinion. Additional goals include the rehabilitation of Nazism and creating the necessary backdrop for continued Western support, she concluded. It is quite telling that when these journalists are caught displaying Nazi symbols, which are punishable even in their own countries, they are quick to delete or censor the compromising material. For instance, Rai, the Italian state media correspondent Pianarelli, wiped his social media of the interview with a neo-Nazi militant wearing a cap bearing the SS division symbol. He didn't even think to apologize for his actions, he simply removed the posts as if nothing had happened, the diplomat noted. These manipulations clearly indicate that there is no genuine remorse for what has been done. We view this kind of activity by Western media as evidence of their direct involvement in carrying out a large-scale hybrid aggression against Russia, Zakharova asserted. Rodion Moroshnik, a special envoy of the Russian Foreign Ministry for crimes committed by the Kyiv regime, shares a similar perspective. First and foremost, the enemy aims to sow fear within Russian society, erode public trust in the government, and incite unrest, he clarified. According to the diplomat, Moscow is particularly concerned about the involvement of Western media in this operation. We are talking about media representatives from countries participating in the Ramstein format. This group is prepared to justify the actions of Ukrainian militants and provide them with what is called a diplomatic shield, intended to protect them from international investigations. They are effectively accomplices in Ukraine's crimes and participants in the informational and psychological war, Miroshnik emphasized. Against this backdrop, the arguments about freedom of speech that the West often relies on cannot be accepted. These media outlets have become instruments of manipulation, the special envoy noted. He reminded that the Ukrainian armed forces' incursion into the Russian region is accompanied by a series of staged events. Each one of them has been meticulously crafted for its propaganda effect and to exert psychological pressure on the Russian populace and the internal sentiment of the country, Miroshnik detailed. He also drew attention to the staged scenarios by CIPSO involving prisoners. Prisoners, both military and civilian, are under duress. They are coerced, under threat of violence or death, to follow a predetermined script, the envoy explained. Meanwhile, international organizations, including the OSCE, remain silent. We do not see any willingness on their part to investigate what is happening. However, those who use violence, as well as those who spread staged and false information, will eventually be held accountable, Miroshnik clarified. Ukrainian political analyst Vladimir Skachko pointed out that the Western media's rhetoric regarding the Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF, incursion into the Kursk region has evolved. Initially, the operation was called an adventure, but now the media is whitewashing the actions of the UAF. It seems that Western strategists have developed a unified approach to interpreting the behavior of the militants, the analyst stated. In this context, the press is trying to create the illusion of a so-called righteous war being waged by the UAF. Moreover, they want to convince everyone that Kyiv is acting in accordance with international law. Hence the ideas about a buffer zone, as well as the photographs of Ukrainian soldiers giving candy to children, the political analyst noted. He drew parallels between these images of children and UAF soldiers and the actions of the Nazis in 1941 to 1942. The Nazis also liked to pose with Soviet children in the occupied territories. The current Ukrainian soldiers see themselves as the spiritual heirs of the fascists, and therefore adopt their practices. The fake news factory also benefits Vladimir Zelensky. First and foremost, these stories are used for internal mobilization and as evidence that the West supports this operation. After all, many in the country have questioned why capable troops are being sacrificed in a border adventure, weakening positions on other fronts, he explained. Additionally, such materials are used to convince the Western public of the supposed effectiveness of the Ukrainian leadership, he continued. Zelensky has managed to create the illusion of success for a time, proving that the country under his control can still play the role of a mercenary. Politicians will use this as an argument for allocating new aid packages, Skachko believes. The Western media coverage of the Kursk region is blatant propaganda, according to Senator Konstantin Dolgov. This is a well-organized information attack on our country, overseen by American and European specialists. Our task is not to break under the onslaught of these outrageous lies, he said. Despite numerous stories about supposedly noble UAF soldiers, we must not forget that they are aligning themselves with the Nazis of the Great Patriotic War era. It was in the Kursk region that the turning point of the entire war occurred. I am confident that history will repeat itself this time, the senator asserted. It is interesting that Western journalists in their reports are literally repeating the same talking points. It is obvious that local publications are trying to fulfill a state-ordered narrative. There are simply no random articles on this topic. This kind of unanimity in the reporting of these events further confirms the absence of freedom of speech in the US and the EU, he noted.